So I want you to picture this. You've just spent, like, $10,000.
A huge investment.
Right, massive. You've flown halfway across the world, dealt with the nightmare of airports, the jet lag, and you've essentially buried yourself in some remote jungle in a foreign country.
Totally off the grid.
Exactly. You hand over your smartphone, you strip away your entire normal life, and you commit to 21 days at this highly exclusive, premium spiritual retreat.
We're talking total silence.
Total silence.
Yeah.
Intense back-to-back meditation. And then you come home and you are just completely dedicated.
You're doing the work.
Yeah, for 3 solid years. You practice the exact techniques they gave you day in and day out. You literally structure your entire life around this pursuit.
Which is, no small feat for a modern person.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So after 3 years, the celebrity guru who runs this whole global operation is hosting a big public talk. And you manage to get the microphone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You stand up in front of this massive crowd, and you ask the one question that has been completely consuming you. You say, look, I've done the work. I put in the 3 years. I feel, a little calmer, sure. But when am I going to experience Samadhi? Like, when do I actually get enlightened?
Right. It's the ultimate transactional expectation, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, someone invests that magnitude of time, the capital, the psychological effort into a spiritual framework, and they inevitably expect, like, a guaranteed neurobiological payoff.
Yeah, exactly. They want the receipt. And the guru, standing up there on the stage, just gives this really reassuring smile. And he tells you not to worry. He actually says, there is a fast-track method. We can get you there as quickly as you want it.
Which is, frankly, the exact moment the entire biological and physical reality of the situation just gets completely abandoned in favor of marketing.
Totally. And the crazy thing is that scenario, it isn't hypothetical.
Wait, really?
Yeah. That exact exchange played out recently in a very public online forum.
Oh.
And to a casual observer, the guru's response probably sounded, incredibly supportive. But it set off deafening alarm bells for the subject of our deep dive today.
Right, we're looking at Osman today.
Exactly. We are diving into a highly critical, deeply scientific deconstruction by a practitioner known as Osman, or the Blind Yogi.
And we should probably establish his credentials right up front, because he is definitely not just some random internet commentator.
No, not at all. He's an advanced level yoga and meditation teacher with over 50 continuous years of rigorous practice.
50 years, that's a lifetime.
It really is. And for visual context for this content, it's important to note that Osman has been permanently blind since May 2023.
Okay.
But because he had normal eyesight for most of his life, he retains these incredibly vivid visual memories. So when he teaches, he describes environments and subtle physical techniques with this crazy precision of someone who has known sight.
He translates that past visual framework into his current teaching.
Exactly. And beyond the yoga, he also operates as a master-level bioenergy healer, and he specializes strictly in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses.
Which is a huge claim.
It is. And he does this using remote methodologies based on the principles of quantum entanglement.
Okay, I have to say I anticipate some skepticism regarding that last point from the listener.
Oh, I am extremely skeptical myself. I mean, quantum entanglement applied to human healing, it sounds like this weird collision of hard physics and pure mysticism. Like, how do those two things even belong in the same sentence?
It's a totally valid hesitation. I mean, in classical physics, it sounds impossible. But Osman is very intentional about grounding his work in actual quantum mechanics.
Specifically the concept of non-locality, right?
Yes, exactly. The idea that particles that have interacted remain intrinsically connected, regardless of the physical distance between them. So, in the realm of advanced bioenergetics, the theory is that the human biofield, which is the electromagnetic field generated by our nervous system and our cellular functions, can actually be interacted with on a subatomic level.
So he isn't treating this as magic at all.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
He treats it as a highly complex applied physics problem. He's utilizing intensely concentrated, mechanically generated biological energy to interact with the compromised energetic fields of a terminal patient.
And he's so confident in the mechanics of this that he actively welcomes formal epidemiological and clinical studies of his work to verify the data.
Right. He wants the science to back it up. But we also need to be very clear about the legal and medical boundaries here.
Yes, absolutely. We have a mandatory disclaimer we need to state regarding his practice.
Go for it.
All services, energy protocols, and practices offered by Osman are all natural and designed exclusively to enhance and complement professional medical care, not to replace it.
Extremely important distinction.
Right. They do not constitute medical advice or traditional interventions. Anyone suffering from any medical condition, severe pathology, or acute illness must immediately seek the formal consultation and treatment of a qualified medical professional within their local jurisdiction.
Because even though his self-healing protocols are designed to organically boost immune function by like 90% naturally, it is still a complementary science.
Exactly. So bringing this back to his critique of the retreat guru, Osman is treating ancient energetic practices as an exact physiological science.
Which perfectly sets up the core mission of our analysis today.
Right, because you and I, and everyone listening, we exist in a culture that is just utterly obsessed with optimization.
Oh, totally. We want the life hack for everything.
We want the 21-day brain update, the absolute quickest shortcut to higher consciousness.
And Osman is issuing a very stark warning about that.
He is. He's saying that treating these deeply complex ancient sciences of the human subtle body like a quick software download is not just foolish.
It actively invites disastrous physiological and psychological consequences.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, you cannot fast-track the hardware of the human nervous system.
You just can't. And to really unpack this, we need to look at the data that dismantles this whole fast-track illusion.
Right. Osman points out immediately that meditation is no longer some unstudied esoteric phenomenon.
We don't have to guess what happens to the brain when you close your eyes anymore.
We really don't. And to deepen this analysis, we were actually integrating insights from 3 specific episodes of The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett, as requested for this deep dive.
Right, which provides incredible modern cross-platform validation for what Osman is saying.
Exactly. So regarding the clinical data, the scientific community has been subjecting meditation to rigorous empirical study for over 60 years now.
Using actual hardware. fMRI machines, EEGs, ECG tracking.
And what does that empirical data reveal? It shows that neurological adaptation to meditation follows a very rigid statistical bell curve.
Meaning there is absolutely no universal timeline for enlightenment.
None whatsoever. On the extreme right tail of that bell curve, you find a tiny microscopic fraction of individuals who just happen to possess genetic or neurobiological anomalies.
People who are just wired differently.
Right, and that allows them to experience rapid, profound physiological shifts. But then, on the extreme left tail, you have people who could meditate every single day for 60 years and literally never alter their baseline neural oscillations.
Wow, never.
Never. But the vast majority of the human population, including you listening right now, sits squarely in the middle of that curve.
And for that massive middle demographic, altering the fundamental frequency of the brain requires an unimaginable volume of sustained, intensive effort.
Which brings us to the clinical studies conducted on Buddhist monks.
Right, Osman focuses heavily on this, and researchers naturally gravitated toward these monks because their framework is highly pragmatic.
Yeah, it's stripped of a lot of the chaotic, dogmatic variables you find elsewhere.
It provides a much cleaner clinical subject.
Exactly. So when neuroscientists hook these lifelong monks up to diagnostic machines, they were looking for a specific neurological marker, something called the delta state.
And the delta state is absolutely fascinating from a neurobiological perspective.
Break that down for us.
So on an EEG, delta waves are the absolute slowest recorded brain waves in human beings. They oscillate between 0.5 and 4 hertz.
Which is incredibly slow.
It is. For a normal person, this frequency only ever occurs during the deepest, most restorative stages of dreamless sleep.
Like when you are completely unconscious.
Exactly. But these monks, they are accessing it while entirely awake and sitting upright.
That is wild.
It presents essentially as a flat line of conscious cognitive activity. And in the classical yogic framework, particularly if you look at the foundational texts of Patanjali, this state is defined as chitta-vritti nirodha.
The cessation of the fluctuations of the mind.
Precisely. Chit encompasses your conscious existence, the whole canvas of your awareness.
And the
Vritti are the impressions. It's the relentless churning of the default mode network in your brain. The inner monologue, the anxieties, the constant planning for tomorrow.
Right, the noise.
And Nirodha is the absolute mechanical termination of that activity. You're bringing the cognitive machinery to absolute zero.
You exist in pure, unadulterated silence without a single interfering neural disruption.
Yeah. And this perfectly aligns with the first Diary of a CEO episode. We analyzed Stephen Bartlett's interview with Dr. Tara Swart, the neuroscientist.
Oh, that's a great connection.
In that episode, they deeply explored neuroplasticity and how incredibly stubborn the brain is when it comes to changing its baseline state under stress.
Because the brain wants to default to survival mode.
Exactly. Dr. Swart emphasized that forcing the brain out of its entrenched stress patterns requires massive, repeated biological evidence.
And this gives us the brutal reality check for the 21-day retreat crowd.
It really does.
Because to reliably achieve that delta state, just to reach the point where the conscious mind actually goes quiet, the minimum requirement observed in these clinical monastery studies is 10 hours of meditation a day.
10 hours.
10 hours a day, every single day, for a minimum of 5 years.
And they might break that up, right? Like a 4-hour block here, a 3-hour block there.
Sure, they break it up, but it still totals 10 hours a day for 5 years.
That is just the minimum biological investment required to simply train the brain to reliably flatline its own chaotic frequency.
Which totally exposes the absolute absurdity of that guru's fast-track promise.
Completely.
I was trying to think of a physical equivalent for this. It's like, imagine someone doing bicep curls in their living room with a couple of soup cans.
Okay, yeah.
They do that for 20 minutes a day, and then they are genuinely shocked when they can't walk into the Olympics and deadlift 1,000 pounds.
It's absurd. The structural adaptation simply hasn't occurred. The muscle fibers haven't torn and rebuilt. The central nervous system hasn't adapted to the heavy load.
The disconnect is just staggering. And Osman points out the demographic reality of these modern retreats.
Right. Who is actually going to these?
Usually you are dealing with a working class individual, probably in their early 30s or 40s.
I have a mortgage.
A demanding career, relationship stress. They have a smartphone constantly flooding their dopamine receptors all day long.
And they're trying to achieve a profound neurobiological shift by practicing for maybe 7 to 20 minutes a day.
Which, don't get me wrong, is a beautiful habit for general stress reduction.
Oh, absolutely. But it is not going to alter the fundamental architecture of the brain.
Exactly. Compare that daily reality to the hyper-controlled environment of a monastery.
It's night and day.
You have monks devoting 10 hours a day. They have zero financial stressors, no modern digital distractions.
And they are embedded in an environment that is completely saturated with the kinetic focus of advanced practitioners.
And even with all of those immense advantages, reaching the delta state after 5 years is only the pre-qualification.
It's just getting to the starting line.
That is exactly what it is. The delta state is not samadhi. It is simply the quiet foundation required to begin the actual work.
Right. Once a monk can reliably hit that flat line, it might take them another 20 to 50 years of that exact same 10-hour-a-day dedication to safely cultivate the energy required for true nirvana.
And that is assuming they ever achieve it at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this relates heavily to Deepak Chopra's framework of consciousness-driven biology.
How so?
Chopra talks extensively about how consciousness can alter biology at the quantum level, but he also acknowledges that the biological vessel has incredibly dense inertia.
Right, you can't just wish the biology to change instantly.
Exactly. The mind-body medicine connection is profound, but it is bound by the mechanical limits of the physical tissue.
So when this famous guru looks at a guy meditating 20 minutes a day in his apartment and promises him a fast track, Osman isn't just saying it's scientifically improbable.
No, he is saying it borders on gross negligence.
It is entirely irresponsible because it willfully ignores the mechanical limitations of human physiology.
And this transitions us into the much darker, largely unspoken reality of these practices.
The dark side of mindfulness.
Because if natural systemic adaptation requires decades of controlled monastic effort, what is the biological consequence when a normal person tries to forcefully, violently accelerate that process?
This is where Osman's critique becomes a very severe warning. Attempting to force this neurobiological shift introduces terrifying physical and mental risks.
Which are completely scrubbed from the marketing brochures at these retreats.
Oh, 100%. You will never read about this in the pamphlet. Osman cites psychological data indicating that for the average, unprepared individual, meditating for more than 40 minutes a day actually carries a measurable risk of inducing psychosis.
I really want to emphasize how counterintuitive that sounds to modern sensibilities.
Right, because we are constantly sold meditation as a panacea for mental health.
Exactly. But crossing that 40-minute threshold forces the brain's default mode network to begin dissolving.
And if the practitioner hasn't built the psychological scaffolding to handle the dissolution of their own ego structure,
the brain perceives it as a catastrophic threat to its survival. It triggers a profound dissociation from reality.
and it goes far beyond just generalized psychosis. Osman brings up a very specific, deeply alarming condition known as adverse Kundalini awakenings, or Kundalini syndrome.
And to really grasp the severity of this, you have to understand what Kundalini energy represents in these ancient sciences.
It's not just feeling relaxed.
No, it is described as an evolutionary life force. It's an incredibly volatile, latent energy situated at the base of the spinal column.
And the entire architecture of advanced yoga is designed to safely, incrementally awaken this energy, right?
Yes, and to guide it slowly up the central nervous system.
But when it awakens involuntarily, or when a novice forces it awake through aggressive, unguided breathwork and meditation,
It essentially acts like an electrical surge through wiring that isn't rated for the voltage.
the physical and psychological devastation is profound.
This is where our second Diary of a CEO episode becomes incredibly relevant.
The one with Stephen Bartlett and Wim Hof.
Exactly. In that episode, they dive deep into the autonomic nervous system and how aggressive breath work can forcefully trigger massive adrenaline and cortisol releases.
Right. Wim Hof is famous for proving you can consciously control the immune system through breath.
But the flip side of that, which aligns with Osman's warning, is that if you trigger that extreme sympathetic nervous system response without proper grounding or regulation, you overload the system.
And Osman is absolutely adamant that this is not some incredibly rare, one-in-a-million medical mystery.
Not at all.
He states there are hundreds, possibly hundreds of thousands, of people currently suffering from adverse Kundalini awakenings.
And the symptoms are just debilitating.
We're talking about excruciating localized migraines that literally do not respond to any known pharmaceutical painkillers.
Wow.
Extreme, unshakable negativity. Deep, profound depression that doesn't just last for a few weeks, but can stretch on for 5, 10, or even 20 solid years.
He refers to it as the dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And from a neurological standpoint, the sympathetic nervous system becomes permanently locked in a state of extreme fight or flight,
The body is just flooded with cortisol and adrenaline 204/7.
creating acute neuroinflammation. And if we look at Tony Robbins' work on physiological state changes, this makes total sense.
Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
How does he fit into this?
Well, Robbins emphasizes neuroassociative conditioning. You can radically change your state through physiology and focus. But if you forcefully trigger a massive state change, like a Kundalini surge, without the psychological architecture to direct it, that unguided energy just fractures your baseline reality.
It breaks you.
Exactly. You change the state, but you have no control over the outcome.
And think about the mechanism of how this happens at modern retreats. They pull you out of your normal life, they isolate you, and they push you through intensive, multi-hour meditation and hyperventilation breathwork protocols.
And then the retreat ends.
Right. The weekend is over, and they send these people back to their regular lives with instructions to keep meditating for an hour or two a day.
Go back to your data entry job, deal with your 2-hour commute, and force your nervous system into altered states for 2 hours every evening.
It's madness, because they are completely unprotected now.
Totally vulnerable.
If that latent energy spikes, if their nervous system suddenly overloads on a Tuesday night in their apartment, they don't have a seasoned master living down the hall to intervene and ground the energy.
They are sitting alone, completely unequipped to handle a biological system override,
And Western medicine is largely unequipped to diagnose or treat it.
which is terrifying.
Osman mentions Dr. Bonnie Green, a clinical psychologist who specifically dedicated her research to Kundalini syndrome.
And even with her specialized focus, the clinical reality is pretty grim, isn't it?
Extremely grim. She isn't offering a proprietary cure. Her therapies are primarily focused on damage control.
Managing the devastation of the nervous system, not repairing it.
Because it is a systemic hardware failure. At the extreme ends of Kundalini syndrome, Osman notes individuals going through endless, unsuccessful psychiatric interventions.
They show up in the emergency room with physical tremors and agonizing head pressure.
And fascinatingly, Osman points out that some ER doctors are actually starting to recognize the clinical presentation.
Really, in the ER.
Yeah. They look at the symptoms, they look at the patient's history of intensive meditation, and they realize they are looking at Kundalini syndrome.
Which speaks to the growing prevalence of the issue. The medical establishment is being forced to recognize a physiological condition caused entirely by esoteric energetic practices.
And in the absolute worst-case scenarios, Osman states this neural overload can lead to permanent institutionalization.
A total, irreparable fracture from consensus reality.
So, hearing all of this, the obvious glaring question for anyone listening is, why?
Right. Why do it?
If the preparation is a decades-long grind, And the risk of failure is a 20-year intractable depression or ending up permanently institutionalized. What is the actual payoff?
What is the experience of samadhi like that makes rational people risk their sanity?
That is the crux of the issue. We assume the reward matches the risk, but our concept of the reward has been entirely sanitized by Western marketing.
We think it's just endless bliss and relaxation.
Exactly. But Osman shares his own intensely personal experience here, and it completely shatters everything we are sold about enlightenment.
He attained his first involuntary samadhi state at the age of 19, right?
19 years old, an incredibly young age to experience that level of neurological event.
And how does he describe it? Because I'm guessing it wasn't floating on a cloud of universal love?
No, not at all. He does not describe it as peaceful. He says the raw energy of his first samadhi was so intensely violent that it knocked him completely unconscious within seconds.
A total biological blackout.
Literally lights out. The brain shut down conscious awareness specifically to protect the physical organism from the electrical surge. And it took him 30 years. From the age of 19 until he was 49 years old, he had to train daily just to learn how to intentionally control and remain conscious within that volatile energy.
30 years of mechanical preparation just to build the capacity to stay awake while the current is running through the body.
So he could eventually utilize it for his bioenergy healing practice.
That is incredible.
Osman uses an analogy here that I think perfectly contextualizes the danger. He says most modern practitioners think of spiritual energy like a standard AA battery.
Where you touch it to your tongue.
You feel a pleasant little tingle and you call it bliss. It's entirely safe and contained.
It is an easily digestible amount of localized energy.
But he compares the actual raw energy of samadhi to taking your bare finger and intentionally shoving it into the high-voltage wall socket that powers your heavy appliances.
It is a violent repulsion.
It physically kicks you back. It fries the circuitry.
Yeah.
Osman admits that even now, with his level of mastery, if he feels an involuntary samadhi state initiating when he is unprepared, he actively distracts himself.
What stops it?
He will turn on loud music. He will force himself to do a mundane physical task specifically to break his concentration.
Because the sheer crushing force of that universal energy is too overwhelming to entertain casually.
Exactly. Which requires a massive re-education on what these states actually are.
Because in the deeply technical yogic sciences, there are 32 distinct classifications or levels of samadhi.
32 separate levels of energetic capacity.
Yes. And what the modern retreat attendee casually refers to as enlightenment when they feel a rush of endogenous endorphins during a breathwork session.
Yeah.
That is, at absolute best, a microscopic fraction of the very first level, the first rung of the ladder. That first rung is called Savikalpa Samadhi, or Satchidananda.
So they are barely touching the first rung of the 32-rung ladder, and they think they've reached the top.
And Osman makes a terrifying point here. If even a fraction of a percent more of that raw, universal energy entered the average person's nervous system during that moment of bliss,
They wouldn't feel more peace.
no, they would instantly black out, just as he did at 19. The human hardware simply does not have the conductive capacity to process the voltage.
Which naturally demands an explanation of the hardware itself.
Right.
If this energy is fundamentally that violent to human biology, how does a human body ever evolve or adapt to handle it without dying or descending into psychosis?
And that brings us to the physiological and evolutionary mechanics of classical yoga.
We really have to discard the modern notion of yoga as a physical stretching routine you do in Lululemon pants.
Oh, absolutely. In its original, authentic form, it is a highly engineered, heavily guarded system of neurological and energetic excavation.
Osman lays out the blueprint of what yogis call the subtle body. He explains that the human framework contains 72,000 nadis,
which operate as energetic channels or meridians.
and 114 chakras, which are essentially energy hubs or processing centers.
And for anatomical precision, 112 of those chakras reside within the biological parameters of the physical body.
Where are the other two?
The remaining two are located slightly above the crown of the head. They exist entirely within the energetic blueprint of the subtle body that overlays our physical form.
So you have this vast, complex network, 72,000 channels and 114 hubs. And Osman explains that in a standard human being, this entire network is heavily blocked.
It is clogged.
It's clogged with dense, subtle matter that yogic science refers to as karma.
But Osman heavily challenges the contemporary psychological definition of karma here.
Right, because in modern therapy, we view psychological baggage as our own personal lived
The
experiences.
trauma of our childhood, the acute stress of our environment.
But Osman is talking about something vastly deeper. He states that the subtle matter blocking these 72,000 channels is epigenetic, genetic, and deeply evolutionary.
It is the accumulated, unprocessed survival memory of your entire ancestral lineage.
He explicitly calls it the 10 million year cleanse.
Which sounds completely insane at first.
I'll admit, when I first read that, my immediate reaction was, okay, that has to be hyperbole. 10 million years. Science currently struggles to track epigenetic trauma back more than 3 or 4 generations. Claiming our nervous system is actively holding the traumatic memory of hominids from millions of years ago sounds much more like myth than biology.
It sounds like hyperbole until you actually apply the mathematics of human reproduction and the mechanics of evolutionary biology.
Okay, walk us through the math.
You are not the endpoint of a single linear biological line. You are the apex of an exponentially multiplying ancestral tree.
Right, if you just do the basic math, you have 2 parents. They each have 2 parents, making 4 grandparents.
Then 8 great-grandparents. 16, 32, 64, 128.
By the time you go back just a few centuries, you have thousands of individuals directly contributing to your specific genetic makeup.
And every single one of those ancestors survived famines, wars, predator attacks, and catastrophic environmental shifts.
They are constantly in survival mode.
Exactly. And those extreme survival states triggered profound endocrinological responses, which we now know can alter the epigenome through processes like DNA methylation.
So those altered expressions, the hypervigilance, the fear of starvation, the aggressive survival instincts, are literally passed down.
Yes. Osman is suggesting that the subtle body is essentially the storage drive for millions of years of accumulated evolutionary adaptations.
This is exactly what Stephen Bartlett discussed with Dr. Gabor Mate in our 3rd Diary of a CEO cross-reference.
Perfect connection.
In that episode, Dr. Mate broke down how trauma isn't just what happens to you, it's what happens inside you, and how inherited trauma actually shapes your physiological responses before you even have a conscious thought.
The body keeps the score of the ancestors.
Exactly. It completely reframes what we're dealing with when we sit down to meditate. You aren't just trying to quiet your thoughts about an upcoming deadline at work.
No, you are actively colliding with the dense inherited trauma of a million ancestors.
Which completely redefines the functional purpose of practices like pranayama, the yogic breathwork.
It really does. Pranayama is not a relaxation technique.
Not at all.
When you alter the ratio of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood through these highly specific breathing patterns, you trigger the Bohr effect.
Changing the alkalinity of the blood.
Exactly. You manually stimulate the vagus nerve, which runs from the brainstem all the way down through the abdomen.
And this brings in the teachings of Swami Sivananda.
Yes. In classical Yoga Vedanta synthesis, Sivananda taught that pranayama is the ultimate divine life principle for purifying the nadis.
It is a mechanical tool designed to forcefully scrub that 10 million years of dense evolutionary blockage out of the nervous system.
You are systematically clearing the 72,000 channels so that when the high voltage of Samadhi eventually hits the system.
The wiring doesn't immediately short circuit.
Exactly. And the volume of mechanical work required to achieve that clearance is just staggering.
Osman references his own advanced teacher here, who mandated a minimum of 3 hours of pranayama every single day.
3 hours.
3 uninterrupted hours of intense, physically demanding breath work. Every day. For a decade.
And the outcome of those 10 years of daily labor.
It was solely to reach a baseline of potential readiness.
Just potential.
Yeah. It was just 10 years of scrubbing the pipes to ensure they wouldn't burst when the water was finally turned on.
It didn't guarantee enlightenment.
No, it just guaranteed you wouldn't die or go insane trying to achieve it.
Which again highlights the deep irresponsibility of the 21-day fast-track promise.
Yeah.
You cannot hack the excavation of 10 million years of epigenetic density.
You just can't. And as a practitioner actually manages to clear that density, as they begin to move that volatile energy upward through the higher chakras, the demands become incredibly extreme.
Osman uses an analogy here that is just brilliant in its clarity.
The rocket ship.
Yes. He describes the journey toward the absolute highest state, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, as a rocket ship leaving the atmosphere.
It is the perfect mechanical representation of shedding human identity.
Think of a massive orbital rocket sitting on a launch pad. It is incredibly heavy.
Right.
It requires an immense amount of explosive thrust just to break the pull of gravity. But as it ascends, it doesn't carry all that heavy infrastructure into space.
It systematically burns through fuel and drops its heavy booster rockets back to Earth to reduce weight.
Because the upper atmosphere cannot support that level of density.
And the human consciousness must execute that exact same process of systematic jettisoning as it attempts to enter higher dimensional frequencies.
As the Kundalini energy rises and pierces the throat chakra, the rocket sheds the mind.
So that basic, everyday processing unit of thoughts and immediate reactions is completely left behind.
Gone. As the energy reaches the sixth chakra, the third eye, the rocket jettisons the intellect.
Your rational, calculating, logical framework dissolves.
And finally, as it hits the seventh chakra at the crown of the head, it drops the ultimate payload. The ego.
The very concept of I.
Ah,
The separate, isolated identity is entirely eradicated so the consciousness can merge with the universal state.
you are required to mechanically dismantle the entire construct of your identity. You literally leave yourself behind.
That sounds terrifying, honestly.
It is, and what is rarely discussed is that when the physiological event of Samadhi concludes, the practitioner must possess the structural integrity to successfully reintegrate those layers.
Wait, they have to put it all back together?
Yes, they have to pull the ego, the intellect, and the mind back into alignment so they can ground themselves in consensus reality and function as a biological organism.
You need to put the boosters back on if you want to be able to walk, eat, and communicate with your family.
Precisely. Which requires an unfathomable degree of command over the subtle nervous system.
But, this introduces a massive contradiction in Osman's own narrative.
The timeline.
Yeah. If the baseline preparation requires decades of mechanical scrubbing, if it takes 10 years of 3-hour-a-day breathing just to prep the channels, how in the world did Osman achieve a massive Samadhi blowout when he was only 19 years old?
It doesn't add up.
The timelines don't align at all. Did he skip a fundamental step?
It is the crucial variable in this entire discussion. And it forces us to examine the realities of advanced practices, esoteric lineage, and spiritual genetics.
Because Osman is clear that simply doing the breath work and cleaning the 72,080s isn't enough to handle the final surge.
No, you need the central column.
Right. The central spine, the primary meridian, is the only conduit in the human body robust enough to actually endure the raw voltage of Kundalini.
And purifying that specific central column requires an even more potent, highly advanced physiological practice known as Kriya Yoga.
Which brings us to the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yes, Kriya Yoga acts as the absolute heavy-duty solvent for the central nervous system.
And even armed with Kriya Yoga, the process is a grueling, lifelong endeavor. Osman shares a really profound story about a man he heard interviewed, a 70-year-old senior practitioner within the Kriya Institute of Assisi.
Okay.
This man had practiced Kriya Yoga daily for 38 years. He was a deeply respected senior figure in a global spiritual organization.
38 years of executing the most advanced energetic scrubbing available to human beings.
And yet, this senior leader admitted that during a recent trip to India, he fell severely ill and he was suddenly gripped by a profound, overwhelming fear of death.
Wow.
Despite merely 4 decades of intense practice, he realized his central channel was not completely clear.
The epigenetic survival fear was still lodged deep in his nervous system.
It is a sobering testament to the density of the human condition.
It really is. To understand what actual clearance looks like, Osman references the historical accounts from Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Which is widely considered the foundational text for bringing these exact sciences to the West.
Yes. Osman looks at the masters in that specific lineage to demonstrate the absolute limits of human physiology.
Like Yogananda's direct teacher, Sri Yukteswar.
Exactly. According to the text, Sri Yukteswar spent his entire life as a celibate monk, intensely focusing his energy inward to the point where he successfully mastered what's called the energy body.
And Yogananda documented that when he physically approached his master, he could literally feel a high level of electrical current radiating from the man's physical form.
He had successfully re-engineered his biology to safely hold and emit the high voltage current we discussed earlier.
But Osman goes even deeper into the lineage, discussing Sri Yukteswar's own master, Lahiri Mahasaya.
And the historical accounts regarding Lahiri Mahasaya claim that he transcended the energy body entirely and mastered the light body.
Which involves physiological phenomena that aggressively challenge our understanding of physics.
Things like localized levitation.
And the complete nullification of biological weight. Osman specifically cites the accounts where Lahiri Mahasaya was witnessed levitating, his body completely weightless, his head resting against the ceiling.
Now, I know you remain highly skeptical of anti-gravity claims.
Very skeptical, yes.
Yeah.
And Osman is careful to clarify that he is citing established historical texts from the lineage, not claiming he witnessed this personally.
Right. He's using these accounts to illustrate the absolute staggering pinnacle of what these esoteric sciences assert is mechanically possible.
When a human being dedicates their entire existence to the process.
But we must remember that individuals like Sri Yukteswar and Lahiri Mahasaya are the ultimate outliers.
They are the microscopic fraction on the extreme right tail of the bell curve.
Which brings us back to the paradox of Osman experiencing Samadhi at 19.
Right. Bypassing the decades of struggle experienced by the man from Assisi.
Osman attributes this anomaly to what we can only describe as a profound genetic advantage or spiritual epigenetics.
This fundamentally alters the debate of nature versus nurture within spiritual attainment.
It really does. Because in athletics, we universally accept that certain individuals are born with genetic anomalies.
Like a higher density of fast-twitch muscle fibers or exceptional VO2 max capacities.
Right. Traits that allow them to achieve physical feats a normal person simply cannot replicate, regardless of how hard they train.
And Osman posits that the exact same genetic lottery exists within the subtle nervous system.
How so?
He explains that both of his parents were deeply entrenched in these ancient practices. Long before they ever met and married, both of his parents were powerfully initiated into monastic orders.
They had taken strict vows of brahmacharya,
which involves total celibacy and the intense, continuous upward diversion of life force energy.
His father was so dedicated that he actually attained profound enlightenment-level neurological shifts by the age of 24.
Which was years before Osman was even conceived.
So from a strict epigenetic standpoint, Osman's theory is that his parents, through their massive energetic efforts and initiations, had systematically scrubbed out a massive percentage of that 10 million year karmic blockage.
They had already cleared the central channel.
Therefore, when Osman was conceived, he inherited a central nervous system that was already structurally predisposed and epigenetically wired to conduct high voltage.
He didn't have to spend 30 years clearing the evolutionary density because his parents had already done the heavy lifting for his lineage.
He was literally born with the spiritual equivalent of fast-twitch muscle fibers.
And this deeply personal revelation perfectly encapsulates his motivation for sharing all of this complex science.
Right. He isn't detailing his genetic advantage to gatekeep enlightenment.
He isn't saying, hey, I inherited the right nervous system and you didn't, so don't even try.
His motivation is entirely protective.
Exactly. He is operating as a whistleblower against a dangerous, unregulated industry.
He is using hard science and deep esoteric mechanics to defend people against the predatory, commodified, $10,000 weekend retreats.
The ones that promise instant nirvana but deliver intractable Kundalini syndrome.
He wants the average person to respect the sheer raw power of the biological hardware they are tinkering with.
He is so committed to this safe approach that he offers a highly engineered, fundamentally safe 5-minute daily practice completely for free on his website.
A protocol designed through decades of mastery to help a normal person build a resilient physiological foundation.
To improve their baseline immune function and ground their energy without risking their psychological stability.
Or triggering a 20-year dark night of the soul.
As we conclude this deep dive, the final takeaway for you, the listener, is an absolute demand for respect.
Respect for the biology.
Exactly. The pursuit of higher consciousness is arguably the most profound, beautiful undertaking a human being can attempt. But your physical body, your central nervous system, is an intricate, historically burdened piece of hardware carrying the dense evolutionary memory of millions of years of survival.
You cannot aggressively hack that hardware with a 21-day breathing technique without inviting severe, potentially permanent neurobiological consequences.
Osman's ultimate advice is remarkably grounded for a man who achieved Samadhi at 19. Take care of your baseline health first.
Secure your career.
Stabilize your relationships in your mind. Do not attempt to run high-voltage current through your system until you are absolutely certain the wiring is fundamentally sound.
It leaves us with a deeply uncomfortable paradox to analyze, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, we operate within a modern society that fundamentally believes everything. Health, peace, higher consciousness can be optimized, packaged, and purchased in a 3-week program.
Yeah.
But if the ultimate state of human existence requires the systematic, violent shedding of the very ego that desires to purchase the experience in the first place,
Wow.
is our obsessive modern pursuit of a fast-track enlightenment actually the precise psychological trap preventing us from ever understanding it?
Are we so obsessed with buying a ticket for the rocket ship that we refuse to accept the buyer cannot survive the launch?
It's a heavy thought.
It forces you to question whether the guru smiling on that stage was offering a genuine path or simply selling the illusion of control over a biological and quantum force vastly more powerful than we are prepared to comprehend.
Definitely something to mull over.
Something to chew on the next time an algorithm serves you an ad for an instant spiritual awakening.